It's Heather from KDZ again. We're in the middle of a video series about white supremacy culture patterns as described by Tima Okun. Her website is whitesupremacyculture.info. Okay, continuing on. We now have the pattern of individualism. I'm the only one that can do something. This comes from our lack of being able to trust people and a sense of identity that says, I'm supposed to be able to do everything on my own. It's a sign of weakness if I can't. So this means we are not good at delegating. We're not good at teamwork. We're not good at solving conflict. And we are putting a lot of pressure on ourselves to get a lot done. This can lead to being a workaholic. It can also be very isolating because we're doing things alone. Whereas on the other hand, if we had a perspective of collaboration, teamwork, and a sense of humility that there's no way that we could possibly know everything we need to know in order to work out using our best, everyone's best flexible thinking to creatively respond appropriately to everything that's happening, whether it's in our families, in our relationships, in our workplace, in organizations, movements, in politics, in the world. So pause there. If you're doing this series through the Facebook group guides, feel free to share your reflections in there. You'll see what other people have written who've been through the workshop or done the videos. And anytime that you are reminded of this pattern, you can go back in here and share your thoughts on it and keep the conversation alive. You can also go to the website to book a live workshop if you prefer to do this work synchronously. So pause, reflect, look around. Although our bodies are not very well regulated, we can take a deep breath and notice that we're okay in this moment, even though these patterns are very alive in all of us. The next pattern is progress is bigger and more. And so we see this with the economy, that we want more cars, more production, more of everything, and that's a sign of progress. And this goes along with the idea of quantity over quality. So in a doctor's office, do we want a doctor who can see 300 patients in 8 hours, or a doctor who can only see 8 patients, but they get really quality care? In a membership organization, is it about getting as many members as we can because we want to get as much money as we can from them? Or is it about the quality of the experience of the members? And if there's an organization that has thousands of people signed up in some way, but very few engage, and the idea is to keep growing membership, maybe we're missing quality. What kind of experience are these members having? Why aren't more engaging? This also can turn up over the question of numbers, which we go through in the ecofascism session, as well as the nonviolence session. And if we have a goal of we need to see this many patients in one day, then it doesn't matter what the quality is, right? It doesn't matter how we get there and what it looks like. The numbers are what matters. They're the key performance indicators. And when we subject ourselves to these kinds of goals, all kinds of unintended consequences can happen. So poor quality patient care in the medical field example. But if we say we want zero carbon emissions, that's quite simplistic thinking. And it can mean that if we're told the planet won't be livable for humans unless we get to zero carbon emissions by a particular date, then that brings up the fear response. We're vulnerable to simplistic thinking for reasons that we've talked about earlier in this video series. And it means that we are likely to say, okay, do whatever it takes to get us to zero carbon emissions. You don't need to know how you do it. And the how you do it could be sacrificing humans around the planet, indigenous people, lands, ecosystems, other species, in order to bring us to zero carbon emissions. And that kind of perspective could be from a place of privilege, where we just want to be able to keep our particular lifestyle, and please do whatever you can to let me keep this, to let me keep my expectations that I have for my children. And all of this is, we spend a lot of time on this in the workshops on hope and privilege and certainty. And so it's quite dangerous to have a number as a goal, because we can then avoid looking at how we get to that number. And all we want is someone to get us there. Pause. Could be a lot of people watching this that have a lot of feelings about things like zero carbon emissions. And this stuff is all meant to be very challenging and very uncomfortable, which is why we shouldn't be doing it alone. We need to be doing it in groups. So again, I encourage you to do this with other people, whether it's in our group or elsewhere. Okay, another pattern, worship of the written word. This is the idea that there's only one right way to communicate in a particular style, but like academic writing, or if you work in an organization and someone's really good at writing policy documents, that is valued above someone who's a very skilled oral communicator. So, we see all the time in social media that people get made fun of if they don't spell things correctly, if they use poor grammar when they're talking about migrants. We make fun of that. And that all comes from a perfectionism pattern, a sense that there's only one right way to communicate, and you need to have been educated, qualified to a certain level in order to be able to communicate without being ridiculed. Worship of the written word means that certain people in organizations will be promoted because they're able to do that. And then, of course, there are going to be other people, neurodivergent people, and others who don't learn and understand well through that type of writing. There's lots of people that can't understand, don't want to give the time of day to academic writing. So are we making communication accessible? White supremacy culture patterns tend to value certain types of communication over others, particularly written word, and particularly in certain ways, which means if an organization centers the work on such written communication and you go in without that, you're not going to go as far, which means we have a lack of diversity of communication styles in organizations, in positions of leadership, precisely for this reason. Have a pause. Share your thoughts on this. It's a big deal. We do go very hard on ourselves if we're not able to communicate in a particular way in this culture. Look around. I'm in a town, La Vega, in Colombia, in South America. You might have heard a lot of traffic during this video series. It's a way to help regulate our nervous system, to look around, notice colors, notice sounds, locate ourselves where we are and not just be stuck up here. Okay, last pattern is a big one for the people who tend to be in my workshops. Sense of urgency. So if we look at this from a trauma perspective, when something is urgent, our body gears up to respond to such an emergency, etc. If your house is literally on fire, you're not going to take a vote to determine which exit to use. You're not going to make a list of which belongings you should take with you. That should have been done before an emergency, right? When we're told that something is urgent, it triggers this trauma response in us, and it means that we're not going to think in complex ways. We're in danger and we have to make a decision quickly. We really only want to feel that way when it's literally in this moment we're in danger. To say, for example, with climate change, that it's urgent, it's an emergency, although we might intellectually be able to notice this existential threat and that we need to be facing it now, the language we use in slogans, in movements, can just lead us to this trauma response where we want simple answers. We want persuasive leaders to tell us what to do so that we don't have to think, because we're not in a good state of mind to think, because we're in this, oh my gosh, it's an emergency. This is so urgent. There's no time to think. You just follow what someone tells you to do, which could be a kind of zero goal or a numerical goal. And we don't spend time looking at the downside, the unintended consequences, the people, places, and things that we might have to sacrifice to get to that. We're not in the right state of mind. We're not regulated for that. So anytime that someone says that something's urgent, we really need to look at what our own response is and the vulnerability of other people to responding in that way that turns off our critical thinking. I used extreme examples just then with climate change, but we could look at it in an office environment, in an organization that says this is urgent. We don't have time to get everyone's input. We don't have time to get everyone's thinking. We don't have time to be inclusive. That shows up in climate movements as well. There's no time to be inclusive. We will deal with racism after we've dealt with climate change. In the optional guide on Deep Adaptation Forum, I will go through this and why I think it's particularly problematic to approach it this way. But for now, just notice that this is a white supremacy culture pattern. Ignoring that label, it's a pattern that we see in in workplaces, in movements, in organizations, where we say, we don't have time to look at the alternatives. We don't have time to listen to people's criticisms or ideas. And we need to stop and think if that's actually true. And what do we lose by kind of manufacturing a sense of urgency when there isn't one? Or in the case of climate change, what are the dangers of using that language when we really need to think very carefully about how we respond to these kinds of existential threats? Pause. That's the end of this video series. And so once again, I invite you to join the Facebook group if you want to reflect on this with other people who have been doing so. There are also ways that you can book the workshop. And if you'd like to donate to the work we're doing here in Colombia, I would really appreciate it. The cost of living is pretty cheap here, which means a small amount of US dollars or UK pounds actually does go quite a long way. So thank you for joining me, and I hope you'll check out the next guides, the next videos, playlists in the series.